Hey guys, this is Victor with Warpaint Minis, and in today's video we're going to get your World Eaters Jakhals painted and ready for the tabletop. So first we're going to prime the mini with some gray cere, and then we're going to dry brush them with some white. I usually like to dry brush them with white just to help some of the highlights pop later on when we put on the contrast. Not necessary, but I find that it usually helps. I'm using the Dio dry brush paint by Ammo. I find this stuff doesn't cause your paint to become chalky, and overall great consistency. Highly recommend. Next we're going to apply some Fire Cere Flesh to the skin. Find that the contrast flesh tones dry a little splotchy. Don't worry about that. This is just setting up a foundation for the darker skin tones I will be applying later. Just be mindful with all the straps and the belts. Make sure to get the head and also the lower back behind the chains. If you get a little paint on the chains, don't worry about that. We'll be covering that with silver later. Next, we're going to apply some Garagak sewer on some of the leather parts. We're going to hit the upper part of the boot. We're going to get the belt, and we're going to get his pouch on the side there. You're going to see me use some of these cheaper brushes on these base coats. If you didn't know, contrast paints will mess up your nice brushes, so pick up a pack of some cheap brushes at your local hobby store. I highly recommend them. And if you made any mistakes, go ahead and go over them with some gray cere. We're going to paint the pants with some basilicanum gray. Be as neat as you can in this next part. I know it's going to be a little tricky around the pants and the belt loops. Just take your time and you should be fine. Again, if you're making mistakes, you can repaint with gray cere and try it again. Next, we're going to do some rattling grime on the boots and the straps on the chest. I've switched over to a fine tip brush to get some of these smaller details. Brace your hands, take your time, and you should be able to get these done no problem. Next, we're going to hit the handles with some snakebite leather. And we're going to cover all the metal parts with iron hand steel. For any bone bits, we're going to cover that with some skeleton horde, and for the blood tank on the back, we're going to cover that with some flesh tears red. So I find it's much easier to turn the mini to the side as opposed to cranking your hand to get to some of those harder to reach areas. This helps keeps your brush strokes going from top to bottom as opposed to left to right, which is really handy for keeping things nice and neat. For the gold bits, we're going to be using Nasdrag yellow. We're going to be covering all the metal bits and the blood tank with some Nuln oil. And with that dried, I think this guy's looking pretty good. Definitely ready for the battlefield. But I think we're going to concentrate on a few key areas to make this guy stand out even more. So follow along and let's get started. Starting with Nightquester Flesh, we're going to thin down our paints and switch to our detail brush. We're going to cover all those muscle groups, paying attention that we don't get into the recesses. Next, we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Nightquester Flesh and Cadian Flesh Tone. Again, keeping our paint nice and thin. We're going to be painting over those muscle groups, but in a smaller area. If you get too much paint on your brush, make sure to wipe it off on a paper towel or use your thumb like I do. You don't want to have too much paint on your brush or else it'll get all over the place. So since we're trying to get these guys painted up quickly, I like to use fewer paints if I can. So I like to use a base and highlight and a 50-50 mix in the middle. I feel like I'll get smoother blends this way and faster results. And for the last skin highlight, we're going to do Cadian Flesh Tone. Again, keeping your paint nice and thin. For the muscles, I like to basically give them a nice thin line and trace each group. I find that on the battlefield, that helps them pop and stand out. Don't forget about the hands. We're going to give each knuckle a nice little dot. Last, we're going to give a nice thin highlight to the forehead, the eye ridge, and the cheeks. Moving on to the pants, we're going to give a nice thin coat of Storm Vermin Fur, paying close attention that we don't paint in the recessed areas. And for our next highlight, we're going to do a 50-50 mix of Storm Vermin Fur and Dawnstone. Again, keeping our paint nice and thin and only painting the raised area of the pants. Last, we're doing an edge highlight of Dawnstone. Make sure when you're doing this step that you really brace your hands, you take your time, and you don't overload your brush. You don't have to edge highlight if you don't want to, but if you have the time and the patience, I really think it's worth it. And for last and final highlight, we're going to do some Mournfang Brown. We're going to make sure we do the belt, the boots, the pouches, and the straps holding the skull. Last step is we're going to dry brush all the silver details. Make sure you get the weapons, the chains, the knee pads, and the top of the backpack. And with that, I think we can call this guy done. Feel free to use some or all the steps in this video to get your Jakhals on the tabletop. My name is Victor with Warpaint Minis, and don't forget to like and subscribe.